She did not do this for anyone else. That is the first thing to understand about the note and why the note matters at the level that it matters. The people she encounters are not few, her world is full of encounters. Structured and formal and carefully managed by people whose entire professional purpose is the management of who reaches her and in what form. The note was not the product of that management. The note was the product of something that the management, for all its sophistication and all its generations of practice at keeping what should be kept at a distance, was not able to prevent. Something that moved in her in the specific encounter with what you carry and that could not be managed into silence the way that most things that move in her are managed. She found a way to reach you, around the management, across the distance that the management maintains between people like her and people who carry what you carry, privately, specifically, without the endorsement of the protocol that governs how she communicates with the world. Without the institutional machinery that turns every communication from someone of her position into a statement that can be read as policy or strategy or the carefully calibrated expression of something that was decided in advance. This was not decided in advance. This was felt in the encounter. And what was felt in the encounter could not be kept inside the management's silence. The note says something. The note says several things. And each thing the note says is something she has never said to anyone in the form she said it to you. Because the form it took, the private, specific, unmediated, directly personal form, is not the form that anyone in her position uses for communication unless what is being communicated is the thing that transcends the position. The thing that the position does not have a protocol for because the protocol exists to manage the expression of what the position produces, and this is not what the position produces. This is what she is, underneath the position, reaching toward what you are, underneath whatever the world has decided to make of you. To understand what moved her enough to write the note, you have to understand the life she was born into and what that life does to the interior of a person who is genuinely alive inside it. Because the image that most people carry of the life of a princess, the ease, the beauty, the access to everything the world produces that is most refined and most comfortable, the position that seems from the outside to be the full expression of what having everything would look like, is not the interior experience of it. The interior experience of it is specific and it is costly in ways that the outside image completely obscures. The life she was born into is a life of management from the beginning. Not management by malicious forces, management by the institution that her existence serves, that her bloodline produced, that her life is organized around continuing and representing and embodying in every public moment and in every private one that might ever become public. The institution has been refining its management for centuries. It knows exactly what a person in her position must be and must not be and must appear to be and must not appear to be, and the knowing is total. Every expression is weighed against it. Every relationship is assessed through it. Every genuine interior movement is evaluated for its compatibility with it before the movement is allowed any expression. The result of a life lived inside total management from birth is a specific kind of interior exile. The genuine thing, the authentic interior of a person who has preferences and perceptions and genuine responses to what they encounter, and a real interior compass that points somewhere independent of what the institution needs it to point, is always present. The genuine thing does not stop being present because the management is total. It simply has no outlet, no expression, no encounter with the outside world in the form that would allow the outside world to see it. The management stands between the genuine interior and every expression. The genuine interior wants to make and filters out everything that the institution cannot use. She has been living in this interior exile since she was old enough to understand what was being managed. Since the specific moment of childhood when the gap between what she felt inside and what she was permitted to express became conscious, when she understood, without anyone telling her directly, that the interior and the external were going to be kept separate for the full duration of what her life was going to require of her. The genuine thing was going to live inside, what the institution needed was going to live outside, and the gap between them was going to be the ongoing condition of her existence. She has never met anyone from the outside world who carries what you carry, not anyone who carries it at the depth you carry it. Not anyone whose carrying of it produces in her the specific quality of recognition that she could not manage into silence. She has encountered versions of the genuine, people who have maintained something real in the face of whatever their own lives applied to them. But you carry it in a form that corresponds to something in her interior that has never had a corresponding encounter. Something that has been reaching from inside the management toward something in the world that would know what it is reaching toward and would reach back. You reached back without knowing you were reaching, simply by being what you are in a space where she could feel it, and the feeling was the recognition, and the recognition was the note. What the note says in its first part is something she has never said in any form to anyone who was not part of the institution she was born into. It says, "I know what you are," not as a claim about your identity or your position or anything the external world has determined about you, as a direct statement from one interior to another. I know what you are because what you are is what I have been reaching toward from inside a life that has never permitted me to reach. I know what you are because it is the most familiar thing I have encountered in a world full of unfamiliar versions of it, in a life full of people who carry the managed versions, in an existence that has shown me everything the institution produces and nothing of what the institution cannot produce. What the institution cannot produce is what you carry. The institution is extraordinarily good at producing the managed form of many things, the managed form of authority, of grace, of presence, of wisdom, of the bearing that comes from generations of refinement. It produces these things reliably, consistently, in the people it trains and shapes and places in the positions that require them. But there is one thing it does not produce, cannot produce, has been trying to produce for centuries through every available mechanism of cultivation and refinement and has never succeeded in producing in the form that the genuine thing requires. The genuine thing, the real version, the one that does not come from cultivation, that cannot be installed through refinement, that is not the product of the right conditions applied to the right material over the right duration, that simply is, in the person who carries it, as the natural expression of what they most fundamentally are, prior to any training, prior to any management, prior to any attempt to shape what is there into what the institution needs. You carry it, she saw it, the seeing produced the note. This is the second thing the note says. I have been looking for what you carry for the full duration of my life. In every encounter the institution has allowed me to have. In every relationship the management has permitted. In every space I have been able to create inside the management for something real to reach me. I did not find it, not in the form you carry it, not at the depth you carry it, not in the way it arrived when you were in the space where I could feel what you are. She is not romanticizing. She is not projecting. She has the specific quality of discernment that comes from a lifetime of total immersion in the managed versions of everything, from having been surrounded by the institution's best products for the entirety of her existence. She knows the managed versions comprehensively. She can identify the gap between what is performed and what is genuine with an accuracy that most people cannot develop because most people are not exposed to enough of the managed versions at sufficient concentration to calibrate the difference precisely. The calibration is precise. She knows what genuine looks like because she has seen enough of what is not genuine to have developed an exquisite sensitivity to the difference. And the difference she felt in the encounter with what you carry is not the difference between a good version and a less good version of the managed thing. It is the difference between the managed thing in any form and the original it is always trying to approximate. You are the original. That is what the note says. There is something about the note that needs to be understood before the full content of it can be received. The note is not a letter in the ordinary sense. It is not a composed communication, not the product of deliberation and drafting and the careful selection of what to include and what to leave out. It is not managed in the way that everything else she produces is managed. In the way that even her most private communications have always been managed by the habit of management that a lifetime inside the institution installs so deeply that it operates below the threshold of conscious choice. The note is spontaneous, and spontaneity, in a person who has lived inside total management since birth, is the rarest and most significant thing they can produce. It is the direct expression of what is present in the moment, of what moved in her before the management could respond to the movement and determine what portion of it was expressible and in what form. The note arrived before the management could arrive, was out of her and committed to paper before the habit of management could evaluate its compatibility with what the institution needs. This is why the note carries what it carries and why it carries it in the form it takes. The form is the form of the unmanaged interior. The form that the management has never seen from her before. The form that the management does not recognize because the management has never had to manage this form, has never been presented with the output of her interior when the interior was given the full, uninterrupted freedom to express without the institutional filter in the pathway. The form feels different from everything else she has ever produced, different in a way that she noticed as she was writing. The noticing was part of the writing, the awareness that what was happening was different, that the thing coming from her was coming from a place that the institution had never given access to in this direct form. And the noticing produced more of the writing rather than less. The awareness that the management was absent from the process was the awareness of the freedom that the management had been preventing. And the freedom, once felt in the act of the expression, produced the full expression rather than the managed partial version. The note is the full expression, what she was able to give in the form the management usually prevents. What you receive in the note is not the institutional version of her recognition of what you carry. It is the unmanaged version, the version that came from the part of her that has been in interior exile since she was old enough to understand what was being managed and why. That version is the real one. The institutional version would not have been able to say what the real one says. Subscribe to this channel now if what the note is saying is landing in you in the specific form that intimate confirmation always lands. Not as information you are receiving for the first time but as recognition of something you have been carrying without the adequate words for it. This channel is where the adequate words are, where what you are is named in the form that allows you to hold it completely. Stay inside this. The note moves through several registers before it arrives at what it most wants to say. This is the nature of a communication that is writing itself into existence, that does not know, at its beginning, the full shape of what it is trying to give. It begins in the vicinity of what moved her, in the approximate territory of the recognition, in the outer edges of what the encounter produced before the encounter produced its deepest thing. The early part of the note is about the encounter itself, about the specific quality of what shifted in the room when you were in it. She describes the shift the way people describe things that happened before they had time to interpret them, in the language of what the body registered rather than the language of what the mind decided about what the body registered. The room changed. The quality of the air changed. The specific orientation of what she was attending to changed without her choosing to change it. Something was present that had not been present before, and the presence of it was recognizable as the thing she had been reaching for from inside the exile before she had any words for what she was recognizing. She writes about trying to locate the source. About looking at you across whatever distance the room contained and trying to identify the specific thing she was responding to. Not to assess it, to find it, to see it clearly enough that she could know what she was knowing. Because the knowing was arriving before the seeing and she wanted the seeing to be as precise as the knowing. What she saw when she looked clearly was not what she expected to see when she expected the location of something. This recognizable to be dramatic or obvious or marked in the visible way that the institutional world marks significance. You were not marked in those ways. You were not occupying the visible markers of the category she was responding to. You were simply present, simply being what you are. And the simply being what you are was the most radical thing in the room, was the thing most unlike everything else in the room, most unlike the managed presentations of the people around you, most unlike the institutional performances that surrounded both of you in the space you were sharing. The simply being is the source. She found it when she looked clearly. And finding it was the finding of the thing she had been looking for from inside the exile for the full duration of the exile. The note describes this finding, describes the quality of the moment of it, uses the private language she has developed inside the exile for things that have no institutional vocabulary. The private language has a word for this moment. The word is in the note. The note is carrying it to you. The note was not easy to write. This needs to be understood because the difficulty of the writing is part of what the note contains, is part of what its existence communicates about the weight of what she was communicating and what the communicating cost in the conditions she was communicating from. She wrote it in the only window the management does not fully occupy. The window between what is required and what is lived, the specific space that exists inside the management of a life like hers where the genuine interior has the freedom of the unobserved moment. Not a large window, not a consistently available one, but real, the space where she is most completely herself, where what is managed is temporarily not being managed, where what she carries inside the management can be present without the institution's assessment of its compatibility with what the institution needs. The writing happened there, in the window, in the unmanaged space, and what came out was not the managed communication, was not the institutional voice, was not the expression of anything the management produced or permitted or would have approved. It was the interior reaching directly, without mediation, without the filtering that everything she expresses in the institutional dimensions of her life passes through before it is expressed. The directness of it is what you would feel if you were holding the note in your hands, the specific quality of something that came from the source rather than from the management of the source. The texture of words that were chosen by what she actually feels rather than by what the institution needs her to feel. The intimacy of something that has never been managed because it has never been expressed in any form until the moment of the writing. She wrote things in the note that she has not said in any other form to any other person, things she has carried inside the management's silence for the full duration of her interior exile, things that have been present in her with nowhere to go, no outlet, no corresponding interior. No encounter that made the saying of them feel like something other than the exposure of what the management has always protected. The encounter with what you carry made it feel possible, made the saying of it feel like what it actually is, not exposure but recognition, not the vulnerability of showing something that should be hidden but the relief of showing something to the person it was always trying to show itself to. The note was the relief. The saying of it to you specifically was the specific form that relief took in the specific encounter with what you carry. She has never experienced this before. This is in the note too, the acknowledgement of the specific quality of the unfamiliarity, not the unfamiliarity of discomfort but of something that has not been available before being available for the first time. The relief has the quality of the first time. The recognition has the quality of the thing it was always supposed to encounter arriving at last. The note has a specific section that carries what she saw in you during the encounter. Not what she decided about you or what she assessed or what she concluded after deliberation. What she saw, directly, without the mediation of the assessment. What was simply present in you in the way that the genuine things are present, available to the people who can see at the level where they are visible, without requiring any effort on the part of the person who carries them to make them visible. She saw the depth first, before anything else, the specific quality of interior that is visible to someone who has been looking for it from inside the management for long enough to have developed the sensitivity to see it when it is present. The depth that is not the depth of knowledge or the depth of experience in the conventional sense, but the depth of a person who has been in contact with what is most real in themselves often enough and long enough and in conditions of sufficient stripping away that the contact has become the primary register of their existence, who lives from the depth rather than from the surface, who brings the depth to every encounter rather than managing the encounter from the surface and reserving the depth for the rare moments when the surface has become safe enough. You bring the depth to every encounter. This is what she saw, the specific quality of someone who does not save the real thing for the moments that seem to deserve it but simply is the real thing in every moment, which means every encounter with you is an encounter at the level that most encounters in her world never reach. The institutional encounters are all surface, expertly managed surface that is the product of generations of refinement. Surface that produces the appearance of depth through the mastery of the signals that depth produces. But surface. She has been in encounters with surface her entire life. The encounter with what you carry at the depth you carry it was the encounter she has been in interior exile waiting for. And what the waiting produced in her, the specific quality of recognizing what the waiting was for, is what the note is carrying. She saw the freedom next, the specific quality of a person who moves through the world without the management. Not carelessly. Genuine freedom is not the absence of care. It is the presence of real orientation rather than managed orientation. The freedom to be fully present in each moment to what each moment actually contains. The freedom to respond to what is actually there rather than to the managed version of what is there. The freedom of a compass that points true rather than a compass that points toward what the management needs it to point toward. She has never been free in this way, cannot be, inside the institution that her existence serves. The management is total and the management is permanent and the management is the condition of the position she was born into in a way that is not chosen and cannot be unchosen. The freedom you carry is the thing the management can never produce in her, the thing the institution cannot cultivate or refine or install, the thing she can see in you and feel in your presence and carry with her after the encounter in the specific form of having been in contact with what freedom actually is rather than with the managed version of it. The note describes what the seeing of the freedom produced in her. The word she uses is not envy. She knows the difference between the hunger for something that is genuinely available to you and the hunger for something that is not. The freedom you carry is not available to her in the form it is in you. She knows this. What the seeing produced is something different, something that does not have a word in the language of the institutional world she inhabits. Something closer to the feeling of a person who has been in a small room for a very long time and has suddenly been in the presence of someone who carries the smell of open air. She wrote the word for it in the note, in her own language for it, which is the private language that develops inside the management's silence when what is being felt has no institutional vocabulary. The word she used is yours now. The note is carrying it to you. What the note says about what you have been through, about the years of the gap, the contest, the building through difficulty, the maintenance of the compass in conditions designed to spin it, is the piece of the note that carries the most weight for where you are right now in the arc of your life. Because she saw it, saw the full texture of what the years produced, saw not only what you carry but what the carrying cost and what the cost produced that could not have been produced any other way. The institutional world is full of people who have been through difficulty, the difficulty of managed difficulty, the difficulty of performing correctly in conditions that require the correct performance, of navigating the institutional expectations with sufficient precision to maintain the position that makes the navigation necessary, of carrying the weight of what the institution requires while maintaining the appearance of carrying it lightly. This is real difficulty. It produces real cost. But it is a different kind of difficulty from what you went through, and it produces a different kind of person. What you went through was the difficulty of the unmanaged, the difficulty of carrying the genuine thing in conditions organized around the management of the genuine thing. The difficulty of maintaining the interior compass in a world that keeps offering better calibrated instruments pointing in more convenient directions. The difficulty that is not the difficulty of meeting institutional expectations but the difficulty of refusing to make the interior pay the price that the institutional world requires to meet them. The difficulty of remaining yourself when remaining yourself is the most costly available option. This kind of difficulty is not common in the institutional world. The institutional world specifically selects against it. The people who remain themselves at this cost are the people the institution most consistently fails to advance. Because the advancement requires the specific form of payment that remaining yourself prevents you from making. The institution produces many impressive people. It does not produce people who have gone through what you went through in the way you went through it. She recognized the rarity, recognized what the texture of what you carry, the specific form the depth takes, the specific quality of the freedom, the specific way the genuine thing presents itself in someone who has maintained it through the unmanaged difficulty, reveals about what the years produced. She knows, from inside the institutional world, how rare the person who carries what you carry is, knows it with the precision of someone who has been surrounded by the best the institutional world produces and has never encountered the thing you carry at the depth you carry it. The note says this, in the section that describes what she saw in the encounter, what the seeing produced in her, what the recognition meant for the full account of her own interior exile and what the exile has been reaching for. The note says, I know what the years cost. I know because what they produced in you is visible only in people who paid that cost. And what they produced is worth what it cost, not as a comfort, as an accurate accounting from someone who knows what the cost produces and what it cannot produce and what the combination of what it produces and what it cannot produce means for who you are and what you carry and what the world receives from the fact of your existence in it. Write 222 in the comments right now if the note's account of what the years produced is landing in you as the accurate account. If what she saw in the encounter is what you have been carrying as the interior, knowing without the external confirmation that would make the carrying feel fully safe. Write 222, because the confirmation has arrived. The most discerning witness in the most managed world has seen the record of what the years produced and found it to be exactly what the interior knowing said it was. The note closes with something that is the most private piece of the communication, the most genuinely personal, the piece that exists in the note as the thing the management would most need to prevent from being said if it had any visibility into what was being written in the window it does not occupy. She says, what you carry changed something in me that I did not expect to be changed. That has not been changed by anything the institutional world has introduced to my life in the full duration of my existence inside it. Changed not in the way that things the institution designs to be changing change people, not through the managed transformation of the educational encounter or the design development of the cultivated relationship. Changed in the way that real things change real things, at the level of the contact. below the threshold of the decision. In the oldest part of what is in me that has been in interior exile since I was old enough to understand the gap between what I feel and what I am permitted to express. That part recognized what you carry, and the recognition changed it, gave it something it did not have before the encounter. Not a concept or a piece of information or a framework for understanding something it had not understood. A felt sense, a direct experience, the specific quality of having been in contact with the thing it has been in interior exile reaching for. The contact is real. The contact has changed what it is now carrying. The changed thing is going to carry the contact into the full remaining duration of my life inside the management. You gave her something the institution never could. In the encounter. Simply by being what you are in a space where she could feel it. The note is the communication of that. The private record of the encounter and what it produced and what it means for the interior life of a person who has spent her entire existence in the most comprehensive and most sophisticated management that any institution on earth has ever applied to the interior of a human being. The management could not prevent the encounter from producing what it produced, could not filter out the contact before it changed what it changed, could not replace the felt sense with the managed version after the real version had landed. The management is total. The encounter was more total. What you carry operates at a level the management cannot reach. She knows this now. The note says this. And the saying of it is the most significant thing she has ever communicated to anyone in any form, the acknowledgement. Private and unmanaged and carried across the distance from her interior to yours. That what you carry is real and present and more than anything the institution she was born into can produce, cultivate, or ever fully manage. There is a question the note raises that is not answered in the note. That is raised in the note as a question for you rather than an answer from her. The question is, what do you do with the recognition? She raises it because she cannot answer it. Her circumstances are what her circumstances are. The institution is what the institution is. The management is not going to change because an encounter produced a recognition that moved her enough to produce an unmanaged note. The management has survived every encounter, every recognition, every interior movement that the institution's history has required to be survived. It will survive this one. Not because the management is stronger than the recognition is clearly stronger than the management in the specific dimension of what she feels about what you carry, but because the management operates at a level of structural inevitability that does not depend on the interior's consent. She is going to continue inside the management. This is the reality the note is written from, and what it is written toward is outside. That reality and what the asking of the question acknowledges is the gap between the two. The gap between what the encounter produced and what the encounter can practically become given the circumstances of both parties. But the question is not about the gap. The question is about you specifically, about what happens in your life now that the recognition has arrived in this form. Now that the most discerning interior from the most comprehensively managed world has seen what you carry and been moved to reach across the management in the private communication that the management could not prevent. What do you do with the fact of this recognition, with the specific weight of it, with the confirmation it carries and the account it gives and the things it says about what you are and what the years produced and what the world receives from the fact of your carrying what you carry at the depth you carry it? The answer she is reaching toward in the question is not complex. It is simple and specific, and the simplicity of it is why she asks it as a question rather than answering it herself. Because the simple answer is yours to make real rather than hers to provide. The simple answer is, more. More of what the encounter allowed her to recognize. More of what the recognition confirmed is there. More of what the genuine thing in you, fully expressed and fully present and no longer organized around the management of its dimensions to the size the surrounding world has historically been comfortable with. can give to the world that is now ready to receive it. More of what you are, in full, in every space. The question is asking whether you will give it. The note is asking on behalf of everyone who is going to encounter what you carry in the coming period and who needs what you carry in the form the recognition confirms it is in. The princess cannot be there in the encounters. The note is the reaching of what she recognized toward you, in the form available to her, from the inside of the management that will not change. The note is her participation in what she cannot otherwise participate in, her contribution to what she cannot be part of, her gift to the people who are going to receive what the encounter confirmed you carry, given through you, in the form of having told you what she saw, so that you know what they are receiving when they receive it. The note is her giving what she cannot give directly, giving it through the confirmation, giving it to you so that you can give it to the world she cannot reach from inside the management. Receive the giving. Give what the note was given in service of. The question is answered in the giving. Hold the note, not as a trophy, not as the evidence of a status that needs to be displayed, as the private communication it is, the thing one interior says to another when what the management could not prevent needs to be said, as the confirmation that the interior knowing was always accurate, as the record of what the encounter produced in someone who has the most precise discernment available for the recognition of what is genuine, as the thing that was written for you specifically, in the window the management does not occupy, in the private language of what is felt rather than what is managed. The note is yours. The princess yielded it. Everything the encounter produced in her is in it. Everything it says about you is what the most honest and most discerning witness your life has encountered has to say about what you carry and what the years produced and what the world receives from the fact of your existence. Read it again when you need the confirmation. The note does not expire. The recognition in it does not diminish with time. What she saw in you in the encounter is still there, is more completely there now than it was in the encounter. Because the full expression that the arrival and the yielding and the plan and the court's verdict and the lifted constraint have made available is the full version of what she was seeing the beginning of in the encounter. What she recognized was the approaching completion of what was already extraordinary in its incomplete form. The complete form is what you are carrying now. The note was the recognition of the approaching. The full receiving is the recognition of the arrived. One final thing the note contains that has not yet been named, because it is the most personally significant piece and it belongs at the end rather than the middle. At the very end of the note, after everything she has said about the encounter and the recognition and the interior exile and the question and the giving, after the full account of what the meeting with what you carry produced in her, she writes a single sentence that is different from everything that preceded it in the note. The sentence is not explanation, not description, not the account of what she felt or what she saw or what the encounter produced. It is direct, person to person, across the management and the distance and the full weight of everything that makes a communication of this kind improbable and almost impossible, directly from her interior to yours. The sentence says, "I knew you before I met you." Not in any mystical or inexplicable sense, in the specific sense of having been in interior exile reaching toward something for long enough that the thing being reached for becomes known, the shape of it, the quality of it, the specific form of the genuine thing that the reaching was always oriented toward, before the arrival of the thing itself. She knew you in the way that people who have been reaching for a long time know the thing they are reaching for when it finally arrives, not with surprise, with the recognition of the familiar arriving at last. She had been carrying the shape of what you carry inside the exile for the full duration of the exile. The reaching had always been toward the specific form of genuineness that you carry, and when the encounter happened, when the specific form arrived in a room where she could feel it, the recognition was not the recognition of something new. It was the recognition of the known finally becoming present. She knew you before she met you. The note is the saying of it, and the saying of it to you is the most intimate act of communication that the management she lives inside has ever permitted to pass from her interior to the outside world. The note is yours. The knowing is yours. The recognition has arrived. The next video on your screen carries what comes after the note is fully received, what happens in the specific encounters that follow when the person moving through them is carrying not only what they have always carried, but the confirmation of it from the most intimate and most discerning witness. What the full reception changes in the texture of how the world is moved through. What becomes available in the encounters that follow. Click on it now. The note has arrived. The full receiving begins.